Thank you for coming on such short notice to join us for the Week of Wellness. I think Sylvia explained a little bit to you. This is a first time ever event for us at our house, and it's a very COVID specific way for us to reach out to the community of people who are grieving here in Los Angeles County, and even further, who are on our mailing list and who might possibly just be Googling for grief support right now. And you came to us at just the right time to participate in the in the events of the week. So thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this week.
Wow, I appreciate your including me.
Yeah. So maybe what I thought we could do first would be to, if you could tell us, your film Pearl debuted. It's been out for about a week now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's a very interesting story about how you were inspired to make Pearl. If you could just share with us where the idea came from. It's really a passion project of yours, isn't it?
yeah. Unfortunately, I had a tragedy in my life many years ago, all the way back in 1988, when my sister was murdered uh, by her husband, who then killed himself and left the bodies for my nephew to find, one of my two nephews. And and going through the whole process um, of what would become of these boys and how my mother and father would respond to the loss of their daughter. And I never even dealt for many years with the loss of my sister. And from what I've been learning about our house, I would have benefited greatly by having a place like you guys have. But being a filmmaker, many years passed, and I spent all my energy trying to help my family recover. And after 14 years, I made another movie leading up to the tragedy, which ended with the death of my sister. And then for many, many years, I've been thinking, but the real story, or at least another story, is what happens to the survivors after the tragedy. And I wanted to make a father-daughter story this time, and I have a daughter that inspired me to want to make a movie about our relationship. And so, to kick it off dramatically, I thought, well, what if she was a child that suffered such a loss and had to go through the grieving process, and on top of that, discovered her father,
Hmm.
who she didn't know existed because her mother had kept him a secret and raised her by herself, and then ultimately with the new husband who ended up creating the tragedy. So that was the impetus to make the film and try to work out a lot of feelings I had about recovery and grief.
Wow.
And
So that was a really brave thing for you, to go down that road, and especially that last part. You didn't share that with me when we talked the first time. That um, to 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 imagine that possibility of it happening to your own daughter took a lot of courage for you to do that. So I really admire that you went beyond kind of the story of your sister's tragedy and your nephew's lived experience to take on that other version that became kind of Pearl, the Pearl character.
well, making independent movies is very difficult, and I've been doing it with my partner Jeff White, who has also supported the idea of connecting with our house and is trying to provide tickets, in fact, for you guys to see the movie. And And I decided that when I made this movie, if it wasn't about something really important to me, it wasn't worth the money, the time, the energy, the cajoling of friends to help, the imposition on my family to, have me gone all this time making a movie. So I'm now happy that the film is finding a life for itself out there and people are responding to it. So that's great.
Right. Now, you made a lot of movies. Have you lost count how many films you've made, Bobby?
No, I haven't lost count of many movies. I think this is my 16th movie, but I've done 150 television programs.
Wow.
So
Oh, that's a lot.
that's where, and that's where I earn the money, the money
Okay.
for independent films
Yeah.
on mainstream
It's
shows
harder
like
to
this.
find that audience. But the world has changed a lot since your sister's death. If you had tried to tell the story then, that's around the time I started working as in the bereavement field. It was much harder to talk about death than it is now. And you made that first story, like you said, your first film. What was that one called?
That was called Manhood, and we made that in 2002. And in fact, my own son played the survivor. So it was really a very personal. John Ritter actually played a character that was based on my sister's husband, and
Oh
Janine
wow.
Garofalo played a character based on my sister. It
And
was
that was
all
around when
fictionalized. It
John died.
wasn't.
That was
John died. Believe it or not, John died the year after we made the movie.
yeah.
John went with us to the Sundance Film Festival in January and passed away the following September,
Wow. Wow.
which
So
was yet
you
another tragedy that we all.
yeah, another layer of grief for you on top of what you were already experiencing. So so how would you say then that going back and revisiting the story now, all these years later, then how was that for you to go back and re-experience all those feelings again, kind of through this different lens of, how it might have impacted a daughter to have a mother die?
Well, I was thinking, obviously, of my own daughter, who was extremely close with her mom,
Hmm.
and I couldn't even imagine how horrific it would be for her because they have such a powerful one-to-one relationship. Um, but not to revisit my own family so much, but my sister, before this horrible thing happened to her many years before, she had lost a child to Tay-Sachs disease.
Oh, uh-huh.
So um, I've had to watch people in my family. Um, I don't feel it's a natural thing for a parent to die before their child. And both my sister had to outlive her child, and then my father outlived my sister, and my mother outlived my sister. So when trying to imagine this happening in my life, it was just almost too horrific. Um, but I was very lucky because when you make a movie, you're a family. And it's as if you almost have 40 or 50 people going into therapy with you and helping you, through it. And and everybody was very I don't want to say somber because we weren't, but everybody really believed in the story and believed it was a story about love. And ultimately, Pearl is a story about redemption, too. So the father daughter relationship becomes what we focus on, and it's about somebody having to deal with the child that they don't. On one hand, they're the father. The girl never even knew she had this father in her story. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they have to deal with her feelings and her emotions. And he's, you know, at first he's completely ill-equipped to handle. I mean, I know I have nothing wrong in my family, and I feel as a grown-up man, I'm ill-equipped to deal with a teenage daughter.
It's
So
to be
that's without
challenging.
gratitude.
Yeah.
So, and you know, so I was lucky because I had the experience of raising a daughter, and also Anthony, at the time we made the movie, had a 16-year-old daughter, and we talked a lot about how little we know about our daughters and girls and teenage years, and then trying to amp everything up with the grief. It made for the conflict you need in cinema.
Right. Right. That's one of the things that I like most about the film is that it offers adults a real window into what a teen would be going through in that situation. That I think for our grievers, the grievers in the community, that's that's the audience that I think it really speaks to is the adults, so they understand what kids go through, and also for adults who were bereaved as teens to be able to look back and be and see kind of how they've grown since they experienced it themselves. So something about Pearl that I thought that was interesting I wanted to ask you about now was that choice that you know, for a lot of the kids that we meet through our programs at our house, they do come from a single parent family, and when that parent dies or guardian, there isn't anybody that they can go live with that is a trusted, you know, person, caregiver that's known to them. And so they might get scooped up by the foster care system, and then enter a whole other series of losses and situations that they have to adjust to. Pearl had to also adjust to a lot of new situations and then start to build this whole new relationship, but not with the foster care system, but with the, you know, this person who she's not quite sure who he is to her, really. You know, she isn't willing to take it at face value. And, you know, so that's an interesting dynamic that you, how did you decide to choose that as the
Well,
story?
it's interesting because so many different aspects of my life and friendships, and I don't have to tell you and your people this, but this this aspect of grief, on some level, touches every family I know. Nobody escapes, and one of the things that I noticed in the case of my sister is that there was a will, and they had a couple they were very close with, and they thought their kids would be taken care of. And these people didn't even show up at the funeral. I never heard from them again. And my poor sister had trusted them. So that was a shock to me. And it was also a shock because I was ill equipped at the loss of my sister. I had a 3-year-old at the time,
Wow.
and that was it. And suddenly I had two teenagers too. And that's one of the biggest things about these situations is the unknown and the ill preparedness of any of us for these kind of things that happen.
Uh-huh.
That so um, I was surprised, and so I thought, well, if this girl were left to an alcoholic grandmother,
Hmm.
and then being a smart girl, she would try to manipulate the situation to where she could go with her best friend, and her best friend's family had money, and they would take. And then the surprise that despite everything, the family didn't want to take on. That often people who suffer tragedy are treated themselves as pariahs because people are afraid. I mean, I'm sure
Right.
you can speak to that, right?
Well, especially in a case where a death like this, where it's a homicide, a double, you know, murder suicide, those very, what we call those stigmatized deaths, that you see the support systems pull back more in those types of deaths than, let's say, if Pearl's mom had died from breast cancer or pancreatic cancer, where support systems tend to circle the wagons more. So that was a very accurate assessment that you made of how support systems would react, but it was based on the reality of what you experienced after your sister's death. So that makes sense.
And then I extrapolated from that with the school,
Mm-hmm.
because now this girl has been very damaged. They want to put her into the main population. And it was interesting. I did an interview with Ming Na, who plays the head
Yeah.
mistress, and we did a joint interview, and we were talking about it. And Ming, God bless her, does what every good actor. I have a friend who says an actor should be a defense attorney for their character. It's really true. She tried to be the most human, the kindest. She wasn't wanting to push this girl out, but she really did feel that the girl would have problems that the school couldn't accommodate. Now, of course, that doesn't solve the girl's problems, but at least it's not bringing more problems into the school. So, from her understanding, I would have liked the school to have accommodated this tragedy. But
Right.
I
But
also think
yeah.
it's a reality, too, that, we don't know what's going to happen to this girl. I think she'd be better off somewhere else, was their position.
And in a lot of cases, the kids they're much better off staying put and not having other things change. And Pearl was such a good student. Your character was an excellent student. She probably would have done fine staying in that school. It wouldn't have caused them any problems at all. And having her studies to focus on might have kept her more grounded, and she might not have made some of the poorer choices that she ended up making, and having to pay the consequences for later. But yeah, so that was an interesting road that she went down. Now, another thing that I really like about the film that you did that I think that adults can learn from is one of the most significant things that teens experience, which you can remember from your nephews, is this um, um, the isolation they feel from their peer networks. That we hear that almost across the board, that they say their friends aren't there for them, their friends don't understand, and that they lose the friends that they thought would be there and have to make new friends. And that certainly happens in your film. And so what a place like our house offers for the kids that are fortunate to be able to find their way to us, or they go to a school where we do our school groups, then they have a peer group there of kids who do get it, that it's like a built-in peer group that all of a sudden they can talk to, that really they can share that experience, and they don't have to feel alone, feel like they're a freak and that life is just like completely unfair. So that you made a choice that she didn't get any professional help at all. She didn't get therapy. She didn't get any help in school from the school social worker, guidance counselor. She didn't go to a grief support center. And that's the last thing that we want to see happen, is that have kids falling through the cracks, so to speak, where they become like forgotten grievers, and then all these other problems start layering on top of the grief, and that's when you have a more difficult situation.
I think that Pearl would ultimately, when she didn't have an adult really to give her grandmother was a mess, her father just didn't know any better, the other friends were shunning her, the school was kind of pushing her around. I think that it could be, the movie takes place really in a pretty short amount of time. We jump
Yeah.
about a bit, but it's only really over a couple of months. I think that sometimes, I know therapeutic help and all kinds of help sometimes takes a while to sort itself out. Sometimes you go to the wrong therapist. Sometimes um, uh, you don't have the guidance to make those choices.
Hmm.
And I would hope that for Pearl, she's smart enough that she was so wanting to cling, I think, to her old life and her old friends, that her first thought for many children is not getting help. It's
Oh
hanging on.
no. Yeah, it can't be left to them to, they're not going to go knock on the guidance counselor's office and say, "Excuse me, I'm so sad because my mom was killed. Can I please get some help?" They're not going to do that. They're going to they're going to not come to school. They're going to seek support from their friends or in their video games, or find comfort elsewhere. But give if her new father figure had any life experience, he might have known to call the school and say, "Do you have any counseling available? My daughter is in a lot of pain." And that's what we would want to have happen, for there to be a grown up to advocate for a child like that. So
That's something funny. So in the previous movie, Manhood, the one with John Ritter, there's lots of therapy involved. There's a hospital, and but it all goes wrong.
oh
And
yeah.
we screened the movie at the San Francisco. We were the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival's
Uh-huh.
opening night film, and it was very controversial because there must have been 500 therapists attacking me
Oh
for
no.
the level of therapy. And I said, look, these are not the best therapists. To me, are like everybody else in society. There are good ones and there are bad ones. I've benefited from good ones and I've been hurt by bad ones. My my the story of my brother-in-law was really true. They let him out too early. He just, which isn't in Pearl, but was in Manhood, that he literally bought a gun the day that he got out of a mental hospital. And unfortunately, that still happens in the United States, and we're reminded too often about it. And so we have to fix it. My mentor, a filmmaker named Costa Gavras, said, if you want to fix things, don't fix them in your film. Show the problem in the film and fix them in real life. So
Oh, that's good. That's Well, that's what you're trying to do, right? And
we try to show the problem, and hopefully the answers in real life are finding people like our house.
yeah, yeah, and if you can make those points in your interviews that you're doing, that's another way to drive your points home. So, for people that might be viewing your film during our week of wellness, what advice would you give to people that are considering using film as a way to deal with their grief?
um, I think, however difficult it is, honesty is the most important element, and showing how difficult it is, I think, is helpful. But I also would want to be positive enough that not that you have some candy coated message, but that there really, there are countless examples that how people have been helped by organizations like yours. And I have never experienced it, but I have a close friend who lost a son to a traffic accident, and she has been benefited tremendously by grief, her grief. She lives in Florida, but, and I think it saved her life. So that's that's the message that I would give, that if you can create the problems in movies, but also show the path, you know, and knowing you now, I don't know if I don't think I'm going to make a third one of these movies, but I would definitely think that that's, you know, many years ago I did a movie for television for Lifetime called Reviving Ophelia.
Oh
It's based
yeah,
on, you
that's
know the book?
based, I know the book.
It was based on the book,
Okay.
and but it was only one story, and it was a pretty horrific story about a relationship with a young girl and her boyfriend, and it was abusive, and we were really speaking to the issues of how teenage girls can sometimes be battered, and we always think about battered wives as older and grown up, and not, you know. And the best thing that happened out of that was I got a letter from somebody who had seen the movie and found the courage to leave the relationship and to get help.
Oh, good.
And so, as a filmmaker, that's, that's gold. That's why you do it.
That must
You
have
can
felt
help
good,
people.
good for you. Yeah. You mentioned that you had done a lot of TV work and that that's what pays the bills. And there's so much television that has grief, grief themes in them, characters that are grieving. It seems almost like omnipresent that it's so common now compared to how it used to be too. So
Yes.
maybe that's something you want to mention as a good vehicle for would-be writers out there that might be listening to you.
I think it is. I make my living mostly as a director in television, and the shows I've done, um, everything from Lost, Grey's Anatomy, uh, Prison Break was my main show when it was, um, uh, there. I think the shows that did the best with it were shows that were a little bit more earnest, and mostly the TV movies, Lifetime movies and stuff. I think some of the shows that I've worked on were pretty intense, and they were less concerned with the aftermath and more the action itself. So
Uh-huh. Yeah. There's some that are doing more now about the aftermath, like Ricky Gervais' show, Afterlife. Have you caught that yet on Netflix?
I heard about it, and yeah,
It's,
no, I think it's a more sophisticated audience, and they appreciate it, and they appreciate the struggle, the rehab struggles that people go
yeah,
through. You know,
yeah.
and life is rough, and especially right now during the pandemic. I don't know how that's affecting, but some of the normal things you would do to respond to people in grief right now are we would probably be in a room if not for the pandemic. You know.
Right, right. Well, so most adults in who've gone to had a couple years of college even have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's Stages of Death and Dying, and um, she worked with a man named David Kessler, who last year wrote a book called, and he talks about a new stage, which he calls the sixth stage, and which is making meaning from the death. And would you say that making the movie Pearl has made meaning for you out of your sister's death? That that was a way of making meaning?
I think so. I think art as therapy. I mean, I've done it in many situations. I had to deal with, I had alcoholism within my family, and I made a movie very early in my career that dealt with an alcoholic relationship. And I think it always helps you. I mean, one of the great things about my job is it's like being in graduate school. If you're lucky, you're learning every movie you make, every television show. And especially uh, during the pandemic, I've watched a lot of shows, as I know everybody has.
Yeah.
And now it's a worldwide movement. So you're not just watching American shows. I'm watching normal people from Ireland, or I'm watching, Money Heist from Spain. And I think it's good to see the way other people treat mental illness, tragedy. I think movies are going you know, hopefully a lot of good work will come out of this horrible time.
Yeah, that's important that starts happening. Definitely. Well, we gotta hope for that. I have one more question for you, but I was wondering if before I ask you that, if there was anything else that you would like to say.
I wish I knew more about your. I mean, this happened so quickly that I didn't really get to read or. I have a general idea of the work you do, and I think it's great. And I'm, you know, just so pleased that you exist. Um, uh, you know, I I just always I got into filmmaking because I'm a person of the '70s that thought it was a good place to practice one's politics through art. You know, and so thank you for just giving the film a platform to actually be reaching real people and maybe causing them to to be a little bit inspired.
Well, again, thank you. And my last question for you before we say goodbye is, um, what do you think your sister would say to you about the movie Pearl,
Wow.
about
Um,
that
it's
journey that you
amazing
took?
that nobody has ever asked me this question on either of the films. And but I'll say this, and it's a little bit more about my family. My brother-in-law is a rock star, and uh, and we had a talk because when I made this movie, my family was not 100% supportive. They thought it was invasive. They thought it was intrusive. A lot of Pearl was shot in my own home. Uh, this did not go over well. And so I asked my brother in law, I said, well, when you write music, and especially he's written one very famous song about his sister getting pregnant at 17. And I said, did you go to her and ask her for permission? He said, no. And I said, so how did you approach it? He says, well, I felt that I had to honor her and the movie had to have integrity. And so to answer your question, I hope that my sister would look at the movie and I would like her to see the feeling in the movie. More than what the movie says, I would feel it. You know?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of hope in it, which really comes across, and that really resonates for our mission at our house, which is to offer hope for people, and you get a sense from it that there's a possibility that those two are going to grow to love each other, and
Yeah,
and that potential is there for trust, and that's really valuable stuff. So I think it's that you've got that all that comes across. So um, I think your sister would agree.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know she'd be worried about the kids.
Well, I wish you great success with it, and I hope it gets the platform that it deserves. And it was a pleasure talking to you, Bobby. If you'd like to come by, we can arrange what we call a house tour if you want to find out more about our house.
I definitely would,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't
Okay.
even know because we're doing this digitally, visually. Where are you?
Well, our main office is on Sawtell near all those great eateries between Santa Monica and Olympic. But we're not
Okay.
spending any time there right now. We're doing all of our groups online. We have somewhere between 76 and 80 groups online for kids and adults. So,
Can I ask you? I know this isn't really my time, but can I ask you, like, what is different? how are the kids reacting differently to having to do it online than they did on their general way of being in groups together physically?
It's not for everybody. Some kids really just did not want to do group on Zoom. And then for other kids, they're connecting really, really well. Even very young ones, 6 year olds, are
Well,
managing to connect on Zoom, right through the seniors in high school. So it's very individual. But we are, like I said, managing to to provide the support that people need, that are willing to do it in that platform for the time being, at least.
yeah,
So we're
that's very
grateful for that. And most kids have a tablet because the schools are providing those, the public schools.
and they're better at this than probably you or I.
They're really
So
good at it. They
they're,
are.
they're,
And they're good
they're
at
not,
they do all those distracting things too, which drive our group leaders crazy. So, all right, well, we're going to say goodbye now, but thank you
okay.
again.
Good luck on Tuesday. And
Thank you
please,
very
please let me
much.
know how it goes, okay?
Okay. All right, take care. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.